Good afternoon, everyone. Uh, to those in the room and to colleagues joining us online this afternoon. This is our first, interesting. This is our first Tubman talk of the year 2026, and we're excited to start off on a really high note with our speaker this afternoon, Dr. Mary Isibor, who is at present a postdoctoral and visiting researcher here at the Tubman Institute at York University. She's also a faculty member at the University of Benin's History Department in Nigeria. So um, she's a historian by training, although her work is quite multidisciplinary and even today's title affirms the multidisciplinary expertise that she possesses. Her work explores how ordinary women build economies in extraordinary ways. Her own words, not mine. She studies gender and economic history, entrepreneurship, migration, and diaspora life, paying close attention to the everyday forms of labor that rarely make it into the archives or public memory. So, our current project focuses on African and Black women entrepreneurs in Canada. And she examines how they navigate unfamiliar systems, start and grow businesses, care for families across borders, and build a sense of belonging while carrying the emotional and financial weight of migration. Today, she's going to give a talk from a recently completed project, which is entitled Sacrifice and Survival Benin Women Entrepreneurs, Migration and Family Support During the 1980s and the 1990s. And according to the abstract that you've all seen, our paper this afternoon would examine how women from Benin City in Nigeria negotiated economic crisis, gender expectations, and migration to sustain their families during the era of structural adjustments that's during the 1980s in Nigeria. And she draws from extensive interviews, from archival materials, from oral histories to trace women's movement in Nigeria from petty trading into large scale entrepreneurship, and in some cases, migration abroad as a family survival strategy. The analysis of our paper today, and I'm looking forward to hearing more about it, would highlight the tension between empowerment narratives and the hidden burdens that women carry, while offering new insight into gender, migration, and development in late 20th century Nigeria. So, without further ado, I'd like to welcome Dr. Isibor for our presentation.
Okay, everyone. Thank you very much for coming. Those in the room that are joining us online. Thank you so much. And first, I want to appreciate the directors of the Tubman Institute, Dr. Damilola and Dr. Bianca. Thank you so much for your support. And to my beautiful secretary, Rebecca, I call her beautiful Rebecca. Thank you very much for your support since I've been here. So today, my topic is sacrifice and survivor, Benin women entrepreneurs, migration and family support in the 1980s and 1990s. What I want to do today is not simply to tell a story of migration or entrepreneurship, but to ask and answer a deeper historical question. What happens when women's sacrifice becomes the foundation of family survival, and later a model that others are compelled to follow? So before I dive into my work, I just want to give us a brief geographical location of Benin for those of us that will not understand where Benin is. Benin is in the south, is in southern Nigeria, which is present-day Edo State. And the connection of Benin is connected in a way that it has been a regional hub connecting rural communities to larger commercial network. Now, its location made it historically significant for trade, governance, and migration, linking local market to national and international routes. This geography shaped both economic opportunities and patterns of movement long before the period I examined. So today I'm just going to give a summary of my work. If you look at the summary, in the summary, we have the focus, we have the question, the argument, and the contribution. And so the focus of this work is to look at Benin women's responses to structural adjustment programs and to look at migration and entrepreneurship as survival strategies. The focus is also to look at family obligations, sacrifice, and unintended consequences. And the major questions that guided this work is how did Benin women's strategies for survival during structural adjustment reshape gender roles, migration practices, and community expectations? The argument of this work is that the early Benin women migrants acted as sacrificial agents of family survival rather than individual seekers of mobility. While their labor stabilized household during economic crisis, the visibility of their success reshaped community expectations, intensified moral pressure, and contributed to more cohesive migration practices in subsequent decades, especially in the 2000s. And the contribution of this work is that after examining the lived experiences of women through oral histories and family obligations, this work contributes to Nigerian economic history and gender studies by reframing migration not as aspiration alone, but as structural sacrifice with long-term social consequences. Now, the theoretical framework that guided this work or this research is that I use gender as relational, not fixed, on Onyeruken's Oyewumi's work, which titled Gender is Motherhood. Now, our work pushes me to rethink how I was reading women's labor and migration historically. Rather than assuming that women's roles were shaped primarily by gender hierarchy, our framework draws attention to relational obligations, especially motherhood, kinship, and responsibility. Now, our argument in her work rephrase or challenges the Western feminist theory that the Western theories cannot be applicable to Nigeria, to African society, although she looked at the Yoruba context, but it was relational to the African societies. That the Western feminist theory cannot be applicable to the Nigerian society. The central case is that gender, as understood in Western feminist theory, is not something that can be applicable to Nigeria's economy, Nigeria's society, because our economy is built in a very structural and different way. Now, in our work, she emphasized that social roles in many Yoruba and other African contexts were historically organized around relational positions such as seniority, lineage, motherhood, and responsibilities. Now, these roles were not primarily structured by a rigid male-female hierarchy, but motherhood functioned as a social and moral position, not simply a biological or subordinate one. She also emphasized that colonialism and Christianity imposed a Western gender system that redefined women's roles as naturally inferior and domestic. Now, when I listened to the reason why women migrated, when I listened to their stories in my interviews, their language was not about individual ambitions. It was always about feeding household, educating siblings, stabilizing families, which made me to understand Oyeruke's framework that states that migration of women's work helped me understand this decision not as deviation from gender norms, which means the decisions of women or the strategies of women in this period made me understood that it was not a deviation from gender norms, but as historically grounded expression of social responsibility. So, which means family obligations shape economic migrations and decisions. Benin City after the Civil War. You know, a decade after the Nigeria Civil War, the economy of the Benin society was plagued with a lot of economic crisis. This was not just peculiar to the economy of Benin. It was something that was peculiar to Nigerian and most West African countries at this time. Now, but to understand these women's choices, we must situate them historically, because I'm an historian, like my Oga said. In the decade following the Nigerian Civil War, Benin City experienced a lot of economic instability, inflation, and declining state investment. Former employment opportunities shrank, and May wage became increasingly unreliable. As increasingly unreliable, families struggled to meet basic needs. Food insecurity became common, school attendance dropped, healthcare became inaccessible for many households. The implication of this was that the women absorbed this economic shock. Their roles was no longer supplementary, became central. Their roles of petty trading, some of them were involved in agricultural activities, they were producing, they were selling the market, but the major thing that they were majorly involved in was market trading, buying and selling of goods and services. So the market was like an agency for them to not just discuss about how to overcome this economic shock, but also to contribute to family survival. So this is just a picture, for us to see the situation of women in the market. And then we look at structural adjustment and family survival. Now, SAP meant currency devaluation. SAP was a strategy that a policy that the government put in place to like, oh, this economic crisis, we all know that is affecting the economy. So the only way we can be able to overcome or do something is to like reduce a lot of things or bring out policies that would strengthen the economy. But however, SAP met currency devaluation, removal of subsidies, and withdrawal of state welfare. Now, families were left to absorb economic shock. Women stepped in where the state withdrew. Their labor became the safety net. Like I said before, their labor was not just supplementary at this period. It became central. It became the strategy that families' survival were dependent on. From petty trading to transnational commerce. Now, women began as market traders and small-scale retailers. Now, built capital through rotating savings, king network, and migration. Migration extended economic scale and reach. Many of the women in this study began as petty traders, market women, or small-scale retailers. Now, through rotating training scheme or saving scheme, king network, and mentorship, they accumulated capital. Migration extended their business practices beyond Nigeria, allowing access to foreign markets, goods, and currencies. Now, the case studies that I referenced in this work, there are 5 outstanding Benin women entrepreneurs in Benin City. Now, these women were not just, in fact, their successes were not just seen on them alone, it was seen on their family and it was seen in the economy. Now, their businesses rose from hospitality to oil and gas to fish or food business to events and to manufacturing and clothing. And one of the major things that cut across these 5 women's story is that they started as petty traders. Migration, remittances, and networks shaped their businesses. Many of them became mentors to other women. They encouraged female education. In fact, their luxury were impacted or were transformed or were seen in the lives of their families. It was a drastic transformation. You could see it. Now, if you look at this first woman that I talked about, Felicia Onaiwu, I might not have enough time to go through all of them, but Felicia Onaiwu is a woman, if you look at in Benin City, she was one of the women that started hotel business in Benin City. Now, she did not just have that hotel in Benin. She has in Lagos, she has in Abuja, she has in different states in the country. But she started from market trading. She started from selling clothing activities in the market, and then she got a connection to travel to Europe through one of her friends that have also migrated during the 1980s. She got this connection, and that's as she went to Europe, and she started importing clothing from Europe to Nigeria. She noted that at a time when she went to Europe, she had to travel with her husband because of the stigmatization that was there that, oh, she's going to Europe. Perhaps the way she's building, the way she's having her wealth, maybe she's going for sex trade or something. So, but she told me that a lot of expenses that she had affected her business because she has to take her husband along for every trip that she made to Europe. But however, that did not limit her from doing her business. So she went to Europe, she got this connection, and she started trading in clothing activities. From there, she has a very big building in Benin City where she started selling expensive clothing materials. From the capital she accumulated from there and the profit, she built her first hotel in Benin. If you're talking about hotel business in Benin, you can't talk about hotel business without talking about Felicia Onaiwo. Our hotel is called Hotel Felona. It's in a very strategic area in Benin City. And then she began to employ women. In fact, to her, when she started the business, she wanted to encourage women to go into business, to be independent. And so she gives opportunity to women when it comes to employment in her business. So the Veronica Igbetu, which is Vasa Fishery or Vasa Food, she was into a fresh fish business. This was a lady that started business when she was 7 years old. She said she was going to school, but her parents specifically stopped her from going to school because she had some younger ones that were male children, and the parents does not believe that it is good to educate a female child. So they told her to stop schooling. So as at 7, she was already following her mother to trade in the market. If they had knew that this same person that they stopped schooling will later become the breadwinner of the family, I'm sure they would have encouraged her. Because from her trading business, she established her younger ones, she established her family. She has a very big cold room in Benin that, as at the time of the interview, she has over 300 staff that she was paying through this fish business. So in the early 2000s in Benin, she was the only woman in Benin that had influence or had the connection to import fish from Europe. So she began to mentor other women into fish trading. To her, that was her own support of bringing women into entrepreneurship so that they can be independent and be able to fight for themselves and their families. Because with this, I discovered that the major story that cut across women is that 70% of their earnings is being invested in their family. So the first thing that comes to their mind when you ask them the reason why they went into this is because I want my family to be comfortable. So it was not even for their personal gains. It was not for their personal luxury. It was all for family survival. Also, when you looked at Dinah Uwadia, was also a woman that went into manufacturing in Benin. In fact, you were talking about people that are into manufacturing in Benin. You can't talk about anybody without mentioning her. She's among one of the women you talked about when it comes to clothing and textile in Benin. But the thing is that these women started as petty traders. And their motivation into business, or some of them said they got it from their mom, or because their mom is very industrious. Yes, we know that Benin women were very industrious in the pre-colonial period. They were also industrious in the colonial period, but the colonial economy distorts the activities of women. Because if you go to the archive, you can hardly see women's labor activities in the archive because of the way the colonial economy was structured. But that's not to say that women were not involved in trading activities or business activities. Because when you interviewed a lot of them, they'll tell you that, oh, I got this motivation from my mom. She wanted us to be very comfortable. She wanted us to be very independent. And so she has been in business, and that's how I got this idea to go into business. You know, I want to be able to achieve things for my family. I want my family to be comfortable. I want my family to be able to do things. So the structural adjustment policies in the 1980s prompted a lot of women to migrate. Even those that were married, some of them left to travel out of the country. And that will bring me to my argument. My first argument is that migration was or is a sacrifice. Now, my first argument is that early women's migration must be understood as sacrifice, not aspiration. These women did not migrate to escape family responsibility. They migrated to fulfill it. They faced unsafe travel routes, social isolation, exploitative labor conditions, and in some cases, severe trouble. Now, one interviewee has noted in one of our interviews, I did not go for myself. I went because everybody was angry. And another one said, I migrated at my husband's urging and sent money home for years. The assets acquired with my earnings were registered in his name, leaving me financially unprotected. This statement captures the moral logic of migration in this period. The moral logic of migration at this period was not for personal luxury. It was for family survival. And then that brings us to where we talked about visualizing success. I'm going to pause Lady for us to look at this picture. Now, when these women returned home, their success became visible. gold jewelries, expensive clothing, public display of wealth, marked them as having made it. These virtual markings circulated as social proof. But these images did not capture everything. It did not capture the journey. It did not capture the labor. It did not capture the violence. Visibility created a partial truth, one that emphasized outcome while erasing costs. Now, the truth is that the visibility was not just visible on these women, it was visible on their family. There was a drastic transformation in their families. You could see a family that cannot afford to feed. You could see them living in luxury within a little while after maybe a female child or a female sibling or a female sister migrated from that family. It was very obvious in the Benin society. And you know how the society is structured, that once somebody is wealthy, you cannot hide it. They drove expensive cars. They lived in a comfortable house. Everybody knew that there's no way with the government, with the situation of the economy at that time, that government or paid work will be able to achieve the kind of transformation that the family had. And so when these people come back, they display, when you see them in social outings, you can tell that this person is wealthy. You see this gold that they are wearing? If they sell it, it's enough to build houses. It's enough to buy cars. I'm telling you. They are real golds, expensive jewelries. So when they go out in a social gathering, it is easy to pick. You can just know that this person is either benefiting from migration remittances, or this person has migrated, that just came back. When they go out to their clubs, when they do social artists, the way they display money, this visibility became, people were happy for them, fine, but it brought a lot of expectation. They were admired, and at the same way, a lot of expectation was placed on them, because every family wanted to taste these weights. So they wanted their children to also migrate abroad, so that they can also be comfortable the way this was comfortable, because it was very visible in their family. So the success of these people, although it created admiration for them, it also brought a lot of pressure for these women. And that brings us to my second argument: visibility and community pressure. Families who had migrated from women's, or families who has benefited from women's migration, now became reference points. Migration was normalized as the fastest route out of poverty. Women who refused to sponsor others were increasingly labeled as selfish or wicked. Now, as Pottis and DeWine will tell us in Rethinking Migration, migration decisions are embedded in social networks that generate both support and pressure. So the community in Benin, as at that time, in fact, these women, they became pressurized to assist other people, to assist their kin in these migration policies or in this migration process. Migration became a norm. Like, it became a norm. Like, everybody wants to migrate because of the visible success that was seen in it. Not just if it was an immediate success. Like, you see somebody that will travel now, before a few months, you have seen that the family is already living in Australia. And so what does that tell us? The person wants to, like, oh, I want to be part of this. In fact, at the time, my research is not just something that I read about or I interviewed. In fact, it was part of something I experienced, because in my neighborhood, there was a particular family. It was very visible that they had female children abroad, but the way they were living, you know how it is to live in an environment and you don't get to see light for 1 week. But you see, there's one particular house that there's always light, because they always put on generator, and you begin to wonder, what is happening? Why is my family not like this? I'm trying to make you see the extent at which the pressure became so high for other families to want to push their children abroad. And that was what led to a lot of exploitative practices in the 2000s. Women will go to these women to say, please take my child abroad. Even though the child is a teenager, I want my child to go, because I also want to be comfortable. Because to them, migration was interpreted as the fastest way out of poverty. And that brings us from sponsorship to trafficking. Now, this pressure from community, this pressure from family, this pressure from neighborhood, push women into facilitating migration for others. Because they were labeled as being selfish and wicked. Oh, you are the only one that wants to be wealthy. It is only your family that wants to be comfortable. You cannot help my child. You cannot help your cousin. You cannot help your friend. And that's how a lot of women started trafficking or migrating others to Europe. Now, debt, oath, and repayment system. Assets traded as fastest route to repayment. Now, one of the women I interviewed, she stated that I tried to explain the conditions there, but they did not believe me. So I took some girls abroad who swore not to escape and had to repay me, including sex work. Now, over time, these pressures transformed to sponsorship and to coercion. Now, women were pressured to facilitate migration for younger girls. Debt, bondage, and oaths were introduced to prevent escape. I interviewed a woman that noted that at first, when she took some girls abroad, her intention was not to make them pay back. But when they got abroad, they ran away. And it became a responsibility for her to look for them because she has to account for their whereabouts for their families. So when that happened to her, she said she went through a lot. And so because of that, if she must take anybody abroad, she must take them to a shrine to swear that they will not escape. Not just that they will not escape, but they will pay her back all the money she spent in taking them abroad. Because the pressure was on them from family. That, you will take my child. Then she will be okay. She will be this. So for them to be comfortable in their parties, that they must swear that when they get to Europe, they are not going to run away and they are going to repay back every money she spent. So these exploitative practices was something that became rampant in the 2000s. Even when families knew the risk that these children or these girls are going to go through, they still insisted that their families members should go abroad. Now, their decision was not born out of cruelty alone, but of relentless moral and social pressure from the community. And that brings me to my third argument, constraints and agency. Now, my third argument is that women were not simply victims of violence. They operated within severe structural constraints. As Garuba noted, women entrepreneurs in Nigeria operate within several structural constraints that shape the scale and direction of their businesses. Many women later tried to reduce harm by encouraging girl child education, safer migration routes, and skill acquisition. They tried or they attempted to interrupt circles they themselves have endured. These women knew the journey they went through to get to Europe. It was not safe. It was not comfortable. So they wanted to prevent other children or other girls or younger girls from going through that route. And that was why they started encouraging girl child education. I told a friend, I said, I'm a beneficiary of European remittances through my education. I went through the university through my auntie that was in Europe because she doesn't want me to go through the route that she went through. Not just me, but many younger girls in Benin, they benefited through the remittances of women abroad. Because they were thinking that, when we encourage them to go to school, nobody will want to take through this route. But then, again, the challenges that we were facing in the family is that I want an immediate success. This thing is visible in your family. I cannot wait. Let my children go. And so that becomes a major problem in the early and late 2000s. They tried to interrupt circles that they themselves endured. But because of the constraints that they were faced, because of the pressure that were mounted on them, some of them became sponsors. And that brings me to migration, family, and costs. Now, despite economic transformation, the costs were immense. Women carried a lot of emotional, physical, and moral burdens. Family survival was achieved, but often at the expenses of women's health, autonomy, and well-being. Like I noted earlier, a lot of the stories of these women, the reason why they went was not for personal luxury. If you listen to them talk, you will see that what is behind their ambition is for family survival. In fact, it was family centered. One lady I interviewed mentioned, she said, what mattered to my family was the money I sent, not the cost of how it was aimed. Not even how the process of the journey, the unsafe journey route that was not the business. That was not the. They were not concerned about that. Their concern was that let the money come in. And then when you are abroad for like few months and you have not sent anything home, they begin to compare you with the ones that have been there for years. And are you not seeing your friend? Look at what she has brought home. Look at what she has done home. And so these girls had to do a lot of things to be able to meet up with the responsibility back home. It was emotional, it was relational, and it was bodily consequences. Their survival was prioritized over women's security. Now, another one said, I'm yet to recover from all I went through in Libya during my journey to Europe. It's part of the reason I'm still unmarried. Now, many scholars that talked about migration stories sometimes do not look at this aspect. I know Libya was a transit point in this process of migration. It was a transit point because sometimes it's like some of them left, they don't have enough money. And so when they get to Libya, it has to be like a transit point where you have to stay for some months to work and to get money so that they'll be able to travel majority to Europe. But then when they were in Libya, they faced a lot of abuse. They faced a lot of trauma that they cannot even talk about. So because of these processes that they went through, they try to prevent other women from going through this process. But like again, the pressure from family, the pressure for community did not allow them to fulfill that mission. Now, if you look at this interview, this reminds us that family survival was often achieved through women's long-term personal sacrifice. This statement points to a painful reality. Family survival was prioritized over the conditions of women's labor. What mattered was the outcome, not the cost. This is how sacrifice became normalized. So the family no longer see it as sacrifice. It became a normal thing, like, oh, since you're outside the country, you should be able to do this, you should be able to do that for your family. You should be able to raise your younger ones, you should be able to sponsor. In fact, it was like it became a major responsibility. Now, this interview highlights how migration did not always translate into security for women. Earnings were often controlled by male partners. We know that Benin society was a patriarchal society, and leaving women economically vulnerable despite years of sacrifice. Now, when you have opportunity to interview these women, they kept talking about the emotional trauma that they've gone through. Even though ethically it's something that we cannot display, but it's something that carries the weight of migration. Migration to them was not for personal gain. It was for family survival due to the economic crisis that plagued the country in the 1980s. Now, in conclusion, Benin women's migration during the 1980s and 1990s was strategic. It was sacrificial and it was family-centered. Their labor sustained households, reshaped communities, and altered gendered expectations of responsibility. But success must be read alongside pain, loss, and pressure. Women's labor, often hidden, is the infrastructure upon which families and communities survive, and history must account for that labor. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, I think. All right, thank you very much for such an excellent presentation. So, if I understand what you're trying to say correctly, and this is me trying to summarize. So you began by situating your paper within the economic history of Nigeria, particularly the 1970s and the 1980s, referencing structural adjustments, which if I can add a little bit on that, was a World Bank inspired policy that necessitated certain policy introductions into the Nigerian public sphere, including privatization of public enterprise, particularly enterprises that were previously subsidized, so leading to increase in general cost of living, which was also accompanied by devaluation of the currency and as together with many things that the World Bank prescribed to developing economies in the 1980s. So you started your paper by situating Benin women within that context, and then you went further to say, and if I'm missing something, I'm saying this as a means of summarizing at the same time to situate my questions. Right. Then you went further to say that it was in the middle of that economic crisis that Benin women had felt the obligation. So also suggesting within the theory of motherhood as obligation, gender obligation, felt the obligation to take care of their family and then started migrating, started traveling in search of economic opportunities. And a few of them became wealthy as a result of their entrepreneurial skills at that time. And the wealth created a spectacle of success that then fueled demand from below, from family members, for these successful women to take other young women and mentor them, or at least make them or show them the way to wealth. But this time around, the road to wealth was no longer strictly speaking entrepreneurship, but it was now littered with forced labor, sex work, and everything in Europe, but Italy, really. And I'm saying that as a Nigerian familiar with the narrative. Um, One thing that struck me about your paper, which I did not know before, was that there was actually a push from below for uh, girls, young girls, teenagers, to actually be, I'm trying to avoid the word traffic because the policy would paint it as trafficking. But now you are saying that it was actually a demand from family members themselves for the young girls to be taken to Europe because of the success that people who had traveled in the previous decades enjoyed. They wanted their families to also enjoy the same. So you're saying that basically it was a demand from Benin families for young girls to go to Europe. That was new to me. And it's only new. It should not have been surprising anyway, because if there wasn't local support, without local support, no enterprise can thrive for long, right? Generally. So then the question would be, when exactly did sex work, prostitution become the key? Because you cited 5 case studies, and you don't, from based on what you said, or maybe you are avoiding it, maybe it's because it's sensitive, but you never said anything about how those 5 women raised their capital, their initial capital to set up their business, the businesses that became successful enough to attract other young people. So that's the first thing that I would want you to talk about. How did they even raise the capital to set up their businesses in the first instance? First question. Then the second question would be, are you saying that um, prior to the 1980s, now this is a clarification question, I don't know. It's not a trick question or anything. Are you saying that prior to the 1980s there wasn't, uh, to use official policy language, sex trafficking from Midwest Nigeria, where Benin is, to Europe? Are you saying that before the 1980s, there wasn't a case of young women going to Europe to do sex work? I don't know. That's what I'm asking. Then, also, lastly, going to the end of that story, which is, I know this is beyond the remit of your paper, but I'm just asking because I'm curious. So, with government's interest in that economic system, particularly from the mid 2000s and onwards, particularly, and I say this because I know that uh, Vice President Atiku Abubakar's wife was really led this campaign through NAPTIP and other agencies at that time. What was the response, or what were the responses of Benin women towards official policy from Abuja to actually stop that economic process that has led to their wealth over time? So I've asked three questions. I hope you can remember, because I'm struggling to remember the first question. So, because I'm asking as I go. Then if I can ask one final question. Um, I'm still trying to piece it together in my head, but the question really is about the main topic itself, the idea of sacrifice. Now, from the woman's perspective, did they really see what they were doing as an economic obligation? Or, and I'm trying to use it in as synonym, this as an economic obligation. Let's not complicate it by adding moral, but as an economic obligation, did they really see their economic activities or their activities in Europe broadly defined as part of their economic obligations to their family members back home? Or did they see it as a trap, as a bondage from which they couldn't escape? Because you seem to make it sound like, oh, it's a story of survivor, of resilience, of tenacity, even though you didn't use those words, but that's what I'm hearing from what you presented. So, but to them, was it really about fulfilling their economic obligations and making their family members look good by making them the only house on the street with electricity? Or was it really about not having a choice? So that's the fourth question. The third question, because I see you writing, would be, how did the people of Benin perceive government policy against trafficking to Europe, especially during the late 2000s? Then I can't remember the second question. Anyone remembers? Uh, yeah. Yes. Thank you. Yes, that's true. Are you saying there wasn't migration for sex work in Europe before the 1980s? And then the first question, yeah, that was a clarifying question. And then the first question, I also missed that. Uh, yes, thank you. Particularly the five case studies that you discussed in your paper. How did they raise the initial capital for their business? Because you seem to be sidestepping. Maybe you're just being careful by not naming stuff. But I'm curious to know. And thank you very much for attracting all those questions.
Well, thank you very much for the question. The first question was, were there no trafficking, sex work before 1980s? Even in colonial economy, there was sex work, right? But the truth here in my research is that we did not know if these women that went to Europe before 1980s went for sex work. It was not known. That's why I said when I showed the picture of the way these women were dressed, we could only see the visibility of their success. We did not know how it was acquired. It was when the pressure became more in the 2000s, that's when it became known that the reason what these people were doing there was not just what we thought they were doing. So it was not known anywhere that they went to Europe as a result of sex work. But we could see that they were successful. We could see that they built houses and they had cars. Even the ones that went in the 80s, we didn't know that most of them went for sex work until in the 2000s, when the younger ones began to travel and we begin to understand what was happening in Europe. I don't know if you understand. So it wasn't, we don't know if their success was tagged to sex work, but we knew that they migrated abroad and we knew that they were doing something for their family. We could see the drastic transformation, economic transformation in their families. So we don't know if they also knew that they were going for sex work. But it was in the late 2000s or in the mid 2000s that it became very visible that this was the purpose or this was the major profit or major business that they were involved in. I don't know, did I answer that question? So the second question was, so how did women raise capital? I said it when I started. I said they raised money through rotational savings schemes. I said it, and I said they raised money. There's one thing that they call in the Benin economy. I told you, I said they started from petty trading in the markets. So in that market, they already have an agency that when they call it osusu. It's like contribution, like monthly contribution. Sometimes it's bi-weekly, sometimes it's weekly. So whatever savings they make in a day, they put it together. And when they put it together, they give it to one person. The person will put it into, without collateral, the person will put it into a business. And then that's how they pay. They pay money again and they give it to another person. So when it gets to your turn, whatever you want to do with that money, that's your business. Provided when it gets to somebody else's turn, you also will contribute. So the fact that they could have access to such accumulated capital, some of them started to do business with it. And I also emphasize the fact that the people that migrated in the 1980s, sisters, mothers, relations that migrated in the 80s, also their remittances also contributed to accumulating capital for these women to start their business. Like I said, because they do not want other women to follow the route at which they went through, they also encourage entrepreneurship by giving them capital to start business. They were sending money home for them to do business. In fact, in Benin society at that time, it is difficult to see a family that the mother was not involved in business. Because it's either the female children abroad are sending things home for them to sell, or they are giving them money to start business. So that was also a way at which they accumulated capital for business. And then we talked about how did Benin women, Benin perceive a government policy against trafficking in the mid-2000s. Now, this was the time that we knew, or they themselves knew. If at this third question, we also answered the fourth question, because this was when they themselves knew that some of them knew that the sacrifices they were giving, or the sacrifices they had for their family, was not taken as sacrifice. In the mid-2000s, Governor Igbinedion's wife made sure that these girls that went abroad are brought back to Benin City. Because to them, they said they could see them in the whole street of Europe. And so it was not like a stigma to the Benin society. And so she went and made sure that they are repatriated back to Benin. But before she did that, she made sure that she established a training center for skill acquisition. They call it IDEA. She makes sure that they have an established training center. So when these women come, they will fall back to learning a skill so that they can be useful in the economy. But the painful part of it is that some of these women are interviewed. When they came back, thinking that they have been sending money home for their family, when they came back, they came to meet nothing. When I mean nothing was kept. There's nothing, not even in property, nothing was put in place for them to fall back to. So if the way they were actually sending money home, the families were not using the money anyhow, we're not doing different things with the money. They were actually building something with that money. They would have fall back to those things. Some of them came back and they started from scratch. So that was why the lady that did that in the interview that I noted before, that she was pushed by her husband to travel abroad. She came back at the time that she was repatriated, and she fell back to nothing, because even the properties that the man was buying in his name. So she came back to start from square one. That was when it noted on them, or it became done on them that what they think it was a sacrifice for their family was not taken as sacrifice, so like a normal norm. This is your responsibility. Just like Oyewumizu noted. This is like, it's a relational responsibility or social responsibility that you have to carry it. So that's when it dawned on them that what they saw as sacrifice was not actually taken as sacrifice in the family circle. So did they see what they were doing? That's what I'm trying to explain. So it's like the third question is answering the fourth question. They saw it as sacrifice because they wanted their family to be comfortable. They wanted their siblings to be educated. They wanted their family to live in affluence. But the irony of it, that the ones that began to migrate in 2000 was for selfish reasons. They knew that this is the route we are going to take. It is not safe. It is not comfortable, and they still want to embark on it. The ones that have left in the 1980s, many of them did not know the route they were going to take. Whatever happened in Libya, some of them took that route as a survival strategy. But the ones that migrated in the 2000s, they knew what they were. They knew that, oh, this is the business you are going to. For you to go to a shrine and swear that you're not going to run away. If you're going to do a legal business, you won't do that. So they knew what they were involved in, and they still went ahead. So that was why I was trying to say that the migration policies in the 1980s became or gave rise to unintended consequences in the 2000s. Sir, did I? Thank you.
Any other questions?
Thank you. Dr. Isibor, thank you for your presentation. Although I came late, even though I was able to catch some of the questions Professor Adebayo was asking you. My my question, although I'm not from the discipline of history, I like to describe myself as a lover or an amateur historian. I just want to know if if we go way back, Benin Kingdom is an ancient kingdom. In fact, the first set of people to receive ambassadors from the Portuguese were the Benin people. So, do you see, or in the course of writing this paper, did you see that entrepreneurial spirit? Has it always been there, beyond the women, beyond? I mean, particularly to the women. Is it something historical to Benin people? I'm asking because, I mean, for you to have constructed one of the most notable wars, the European civilization. Please correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah.
So I'm interested in the history of entrepreneur generally in Benin Kingdom, especially amongst the women. So that's because as an African, I want to be very careful how we tell our own stories, especially in the academia, because I mean the average European listening to this will just make some conclusions, draw some conclusions, even though these things happen everywhere. So that is why I'm asking that question of how entrepreneurial were the Benin women before the 1980s and 1990s, especially during the times of Uhunoma and the likes. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much for that wonderful presentation. I would say that I am in love with it personally on different grounds. So even though I was late, but I think I was able to like get a hold of like the gist of the conversation. And I must say that this is very a wonderful research and then how to like these women about their experiences. And I think my question is mostly tied to some of those experiences from these women. I was just curious. And then also my curiosity is tied to my implicatedness, because I feel like research includes like research methods should include like although this is like a feminist like approach, but I think it's also important to be employed like the relationalities of like the researches we have to the present, and then with the fact that this is about women and then it's Nigerian women, I mean woman, and I'm Nigerian and I'm implicated in this, and I'm also like abroad, so I migrated, so and then so my first question is like, I'm not sure like I was able to like, but I hope you like get my question. So eh, were there instances of resistance from these women, like from the conversation you had with them, and what consequences came from such resistance, if they actually had, and like maybe like resistance from like pressure from below, like Professor Dami said, and even like sending back money home. And then another thing that I want to ask is in terms of like also implicationality, and then you mentioned in while you were addressing some of the questions Professor Debayo raised, is like the times of the 2000s, right? That it's different. I think using your words as selfish reasons, right? So I wanted to like ask, what could you say are those reasons? Like, if maybe you've read, I don't know, but I wouldn't say that I know, but I want to hear what you could say, and what is the of course they probably are going to be different. Like, what are those reasons or factors that are contributing to like the 2000s migration? Because I think we are also in the 2000s, right? So and okay. Okay. Another thing is, in addition to this implicationality of like the times, the special temporal climate, a woman interview spoke about like regret on like their unmarriedness, like singleness, right? So is there like, based on that person, but I don't know if it's cut across like your women interviewees, but if there are, I'm so curious to know like what could actually be like the principal causes to, or rather cause to that, to that effect, and if there is any, and then I think that's all. Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation, Mary. It's a pleasure for me to see you again. We spent good times in June, but now it's not the same thing. Congratulations for your presentation, but I have some questions, and we are researcher, and I want us to think about some things. The first question is, what is the major religion in Benin? It will help me to continue. What's the major religion? Like Muslim, Christian? Makes Okay, thank you. I'm not Nigerian, so I need some clarifications. And in the 1960s, so the time to choose for the study, you talk about the experience of women in Libya. This is shown that it was mostly illegal immigration, because you said the experience, when you go through Libya, this means that this illegal. Oh, am I right? So this is to say that the women migrated illegally most of the time. Or no, I just want to. Okay. And the last one is not a question. I would like to see with you and the other, what do you think about how can you link this study? Maybe you have done that before, with a theory. You know that us francophones, we are really, the field work is very good, is interesting, but I think to link it with a theory can make us or the other researcher, and even the researcher who are abroad, to really understand the fact. I'm saying that because when you presented, this was really interested to see how African women can do. Okay. to see how women African and are powerful, because they are economically powerful. That's how they bring order in the, just help other girls to be abroad. And for me, this is a real this is an important argument to show the feminism, the post-colonial feminism. This can be shown how women or how African women have their own way of thinking and how the experiences of African women of the third world country contribute to the studies of feminism instead of thinking always about radical feminism or liberal feminism. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that many questions. It means that we're following. Thank you. Now, they asked the first question, say, was there entrepreneurship in the pre-colonial Benin society? Like he came late, so that's why he do. In fact, Benin women have always been industrious. Like I explained, I said migration only expanded the strategies of Benin women business. I did not say it started it. I said it expanded because there have always been something in place, even in the pre-colonial period. The Benin women were instrumental to governance, to societal development. They were very creative in poetry. They were very creative in agriculture. In fact, the men were only in the farm. The women were the ones that sells the product. So in the colonial economy, they were moving from one rural communities to the other, still for family survival. So they have always been very creative. I made an example. I said even in the colonial economy, the Benin women were very industrious, but the colonial economy excluded these activities from the archives. There was no record of a lot of women activities in the colonial economy because of the way it was structured. So that is not to say that women were not instrumental. When I was talking about the examples of these women, I insisted that they learned their trading activities from their mothers. So for them to learn these things from their mothers, it means that their mothers were industrious. So if their mother were not in business, so how would they learn? So the Benin society women in the Benin society has always been industrious. So I only said that the 1980s expanded on these business strategies that they have had because the remittances from Europe began to improve more on their business because you need money to establish good business. It was no longer petty trading activities. Most of them began to engage in large-scale entrepreneurship. So, sir, have I answered that question? Okay, thank you. Then the second question was, were there instances of resistance from these women and what consequences came from these instances? Like my sister asked, if you are being exploited at a time, you must resist. Now, but I made an example that I first said that when the first set of women took these girls abroad, at first, their intention was good. Their intention was that, okay, I've made it, let me also help somebody. But when they got there, some of these girls escaped. And so the implication was on them because how can you not come back and tell a family that you took a child abroad and come and tell the family that the child has escaped, that you don't have access to the child anymore? And you know that period to get telephone was a problem. So it means that they could only reach these girls through the person that took them away. And so when they now talk to the person, and the person is telling them that I don't have access to this person, how can you give account of it? So in order for that to not happen again, they had to make them go through a lot of oath swearing, a lot of devices so that they will not be able to escape. Now, I don't know if that was real, but I know that this put a lot of fear in them. Even when they want to resist, they couldn't resist because they were scared. And you are in front of a strand, you are swearing to oath that I'm not going to run away, I'm going to repay the money you're going to spend, and then when you get there, you want to run away. The fear that it gives to them first will not make them resist. According to the stories of most of them that I interviewed. And some of them that also resisted, that were so stubborn enough to like escape. When they had how will I put it now? When they begin to have issues, some of them tagged it to the swearing that they had. That maybe because I escaped, because after I had made an oath and I escaped, maybe that's why I'm facing this hardship. Because getting a job was not easy, especially when you're not educated. It wasn't easy. So maybe when they are facing a lot of economic crisis, they began to take it back to what they must have encountered. Maybe because I swore, I made an oath, I made a promise, and because I ran away. Maybe that's why, I don't know, maybe that is why I'm facing this kind of hardship. However, a lot of them also made the decision to run away, but they were tied to a bond. And that bond is something that they must fulfill. So in order to fulfill that bond, that was why sex work became so rampant, because that was the fastest way to make money. Because at least it gives you every day to them. It gives them everyday money that if you want to work, you have to wait maybe bi-weekly or monthly or weekly to get payment.
But the weight of the financial weight of what they have to repay, a lot of them went into sex work. Have I answered that question?
So I have a follow-up question to this before you go on to the next. So from what you said, I am getting 2 points. I wanted to know exactly, like, the women you were interviewing, they were they the people that these women too. Interesting to me. That's why I'm trying to get this clarification. Like, so the interviews you conducted were only from the interviewees were the women entrepreneurs, right? Okay, I think I would.
Women.
Okay, okay, 3. Okay, so I understand, and I think I've gotten the point from on the type of resistance from the women entrepreneurs, right? Those that took them. So I'm curious about the people they took, the experience of those people. Like, how did they resist, and what are the consequences? I believe that those people are actually the ones that the family pressure to go out, and then they actually pleaded with this woman figure, the Messiah, let me just say Messiah, to take the child out. So what about the experience of those ones? That's what I'm asking.
Thank you very much. But please, to correct that, I did not emphasize that the women that took girls were entrepreneurs. I only noted that when I was talking about migration. If you look at the topic, I'm looking at migration entrepreneurship. Yeah. So I did not emphasize that they were entrepreneurs. And then the entrepreneurs that I know that I interviewed, there were no resistance from them. I only talked about the activities, how they started to introduce other women into entrepreneurship, and how they also introduced other women, how they had to mentor other women into businesses because they became successful in theirs. So when I got to the aspect of migration, that's when I began to talk about what I talked about, right? There were resistances, like I said, from women, from the girls, especially that did not go on their own, like especially that went because of family pressure. Because some of them actually went because their family pressurized them to go. They went to meet other women that were successful that came back, and they were insisting that, oh, I want my girls to go. Even when those ones were telling them that this is not, it's not a comfortable place, but they didn't want to believe because they felt that it's just like, you are wealthy and I'm telling you that, please teach me how you got your wealth. And you are not telling me that, oh no, it's not something you can do. The first impression that will come to my mind is that you don't want to help me. So because of that, these women stopped telling them the process or the journey or the labor they are going to encounter. So when they come to them, they saw it as something that, okay, after all, I'm going to benefit from it. When I take you there, you are going to pay me. So it was when these girls got there, they began to know the weight of what they encountered. Now, some of them went willingly. We must be truthful about it. And these ones that went willingly went because they wanted luxury, because they saw the transformation that other families were going through. Because a lot of families that migrated also came to take their younger ones. But the truth is that if I've gone through a difficult path and I'm taking my younger ones, my younger one is not coming to go through that path, that route. If my younger one is coming to enjoy what I have labored for. But the other younger girls that are seeing that aspect, like, oh, my mate traveled last year. Look, she's driving car already. She's doing this like that. They did not see the fact that, oh, it was her elder sister that took her abroad. So there's no way she would go through the route that the elder sister went through because the rest have already paid the price. So, but you that you don't have anybody that have gone ahead of you, you need to create that path and you need to pay that price. So some of them were willing, even when they knew that maybe they'll call their friends and say, it's not easy abroad though. If you come here, you face a lot of things. I don't mind, I will go. I want to live, I want to be comfortable. It was no longer for family survivor. It was not for personal interest. So that was why at the time it became so rampant in Europe that the governor began to clamor for the fact that we need to bring these girls back. And so when they came, some of them felt so bad because the money they were bringing back home, to them, the family was establishing something that they would fall back to for them, only for them to come and see that they fall back to nothing. So it's like they want to start from square one. They didn't go to school. Some of them didn't learn the trade. Do you understand? And so coming back, not seeing anything put in place for you, It's like you're starting afresh again. And then having living a particular set of life that ethical reason will not make us emphasize on, it became very difficult for them to cope. I don't know if you understand what I'm trying to explain. And then could you say were the reasons in the mid-20s? Okay, that's what I just talked about. Then principal cause to that effect. Now, many of them that resisted, or many of them that told me stories, what they went through, and I noted an interview where the lady said, this is the major reason why she doesn't want to get married. I said, visibility of success was partial proof in a way that you could not measure the violence, you could not measure the labor, you could not measure the trauma that these people went through. Now, some of them opened up and said, what I went through in Libya, I hate men. Maybe because they were abused by men also. So that thing is that, how will I now come and stay with a man in the house? This is the reason why I cannot even sleep at night is because of a man. Psychologically and the trauma that they go through. So, there's no need. And some of them have been involved in a trade that you cannot even measure what they have gone through. And so being with one man is like, who be this man? Now, these are some of the reasons that I saw during my interviews. You could even tell that the anger at which they were talking about, especially the ones that did not go willingly, that the ones that went because of the pressure of family, you could see when they are talking about it. One of them said, I went, my family did not care how I was getting the money. All their own is that send money home. So you could see them talking about it. And especially when they now come back and fall back to, there was nothing in place for them. Not even one business with all the money that they have spent. So they came back and you now tell these people to now start going to an agency to start learning skill. It was only a few that concentrated in that skills. Because they have touched money, they have seen wealth. And then you now bring them back to come and start going to one place and go and be learning one thing. It was difficult for them. Now, it means she made an example that it means it was an illegal business. Yeah, it was an illegal business in the 2000s. In the 1980s, I won't say it was an illegal business because they went because of family survival. They went because they wanted to take care of their family.
Yeah.
She was insisting that means it's an illegal.
Yeah, because if they have visa, why would they have to travel by land?
Just take the plane and
That's why I was saying that. I said yes, indeed, it was an illegal business because they could not have access to legal documents to travel. But I did not call, even though the ones in the 1980s, we see them as legal business, but then the economic crisis that was plaguing the country at that time, how would they get enough money to travel legally? So they had to take through the road and start breaking the journey. And so when they got to Libya, a lot of them had to transit there for some time. Some of them even stayed there for years just to save money, to work and save money to be able to cross to Europe. Now she talked about theory, and of course I did that when I started because you came late. Yes, thank you. Thank you very much.
You have more questions, or because otherwise this is also a good place to stop.
Thank you very much for coming. For those online, thank you for joining us.
All right, thank you very much, everyone, for attending today's talk. This is our first talk of the term, but next month is pretty packed. Today's January 22nd, and we only have one more Thursday this January, and we don't have a talk next week. But the whole of January is Black History Month. From the beginning of the month all the way through to the end, we have series of events. You're already receiving emails from us. If you're here, obviously, I kindly ask that you please pay attention to emails, even the posters around here in the hallway for Black History Month activities, from art showings to discussions around migration. The theme of the Black History Month for this year is the politics and poetics of migration. And we're going to be exploring that migration in all its diverse forms throughout the month of February. So I ask that you join us and you also spread the news around. Thank you so much and enjoy the rest of the evening. And thanks again to Dr. Mary Isibor for such an enlightening conversation. I mean, one of the biggest index for measuring a successful talk is the kind of discussion that it generates. And even though we're very few in this room, we've had such interesting questions and comments from everyone. And it can only get better going forward. Thank you so much and enjoy the rest of your evening.